Thank you all for joining me today to talk about client listening. As I know some of you, but not all of you, my name is Anna Lake, and I'm one half of a business called Client Talk. And we specialize in client listening, in client experience, in business development training, and coaching. And most of our clients are in professional services, but we work with clients in other sectors too. And in professional services, we work with firms of all sizes, right from local firms through to Magic Circle firms, law, accountancy, consultancy, property. So across all of professional services, some of whom have quite mature client listening programs, some who don't really do it at all, and everything in between. So hopefully, what I'll cover today will help you wherever you are on your client listening journey. So let's get sharing. Okay. Can everybody see the slides? Not yet. Hang on. You can probably see my notes as well. There we go. Everybody see the slides? Nods.
Yes.
Excellent. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, what I'm going to cover today is a bit about back to basics around client listening. As I said, some people have, you know, very mature programs and some people are just starting. Um, but actually, even if you've got a really mature program, it can sometimes be helpful just to go back to those basics and to start thinking about the foundations for your program. There's been the pace of tech change has been just phenomenal over the last few years. And what we found is that people are kind of layering, dashboards and tech and AI and lots of layers of complexity into their programs. And that's great. But actually, sometimes just taking a step back and kind of remembering why you're doing your program and the things that make it what it is a really useful way of just kind of recentering. So, I gave you a bit of background about me, and in terms of why I am here talking to you about client listening, I spent a number of years at Deloitte, then at BDO, and at BDO, I was responsible for their exceptional client service agenda. And this was at a time in the early 2010s when we were the only firm really talking about client service and client experience as a differentiator among our competitors. So I've been talking about this for quite a long time. And now lots of firms are talking about it, which is great. But it can then be difficult to kind of cut through some of the talk and in terms of what makes your program special and how it impacts on your firm. So, client listening, why it matters. So, everybody hopefully is on this call because you know that it matters in terms of listening to your clients, no matter the size of your business. Um, but it's a good reminder to think about why it's important. And that is because happy clients, they buy more from us, they stay with us longer, they refer us more. And that's such a good way of growing organically. Partners like that growth because it's more profitable. You're not having to chase new clients all the time, which is more expensive than growing through the clients that you've already got. Client listening is also a great way to build trust with your clients, but only if you act on what you hear. So, a lot of the time, I'm talking to people and they're saying, we're getting all this great insight, but we're not actually doing anything with it. And that's a problem that's becoming more and more commonplace is people are getting the volume, but they're not either getting the quality or they're not necessarily acting on what they're hearing, and we'll come to that a bit later. Um, And it matters because it gives the client an opportunity to step away from the day-to-day conversations that they're having around delivery. And one of the objections that you will have probably faced if you're in a bigger firm is partners or directors or people saying, well, we're talking to our clients all the time anyway, so why do we need client listening? Well, obviously they are talking to their clients day to day, but this is a different kind of interaction. And that's why it's important for client listening to be conducted by somebody who is not necessarily involved in the day to day, because you don't get drawn into what's happening on the ground. It's a different kind of conversation about what's going on in the wider relationship. It also, provides a space for clients to reflect. It Clients actually tell us, and they tell the firms that are listening to them, that they find it a valuable exercise. So they appreciate that it's not part of the day to day, that it's a real opportunity to share what's important to them in terms of what's going on around the work. And it's not a sales conversation. So although it might you might identify some business development opportunities as a result of client listening, the conversation itself is not a sales conversation. Some of you will have seen this. I love this representation from HubSpot around the importance of growing through current clients. So whereas clients used to, or prospects used to go through your funnel, they'd pop out the end as a customer or a client. They tend to then be largely forgotten about. Whereas nowadays, businesses are flexing and putting a lot of emphasis on the clients at the center of everything they do. And that helps with growth and listening to the clients and making sure that you're taking action on what you'll hear will help you grow those accounts. So in terms of a successful client listening program, senior sponsorship is really important. And I know that on this call there are a range of different size of businesses and practices. So obviously, Tom and your colleagues, you are the boss and you are the doer. So you've kind of got that senior buy-in, but where you're working for larger firms, having that senior sponsorship is so important. It gives you backing as a team. It gives reluctant partners a push, hopefully. And it really elevates the importance of the program internally. And those programs that we see that are really successful have a senior figurehead championing the program. Could be the managing partner, the senior partner, but somebody who is senior within the organization. Then you need to know why you're doing it. You need to know why you're doing client listening. So there's no point in collecting the feedback unless you've actually got a reason for doing so. And the obvious reason is around to get a gauge and improve on your client service. But it could also be around, the purpose could be around market perception. So some of the projects we work on are around, we'd love to know what our clients or our referrers or other stakeholders who are important to us, what do they think of us as an organization? And it can also help to support things like brand projects or a specific marketing campaign. The next point is around speaking to a range of clients, and those of us who are sitting in client listening or client experience roles, that's obvious to us, and that's where we can quite quickly get frustrated. So where partners cherry pick the clients to put forward, so they're only putting forward happy clients. And obviously it's great to know that you are doing a good job, but you need to have that balance. It's so important to hear from the people who might be less than satisfied. And one of the big blockers that we come up with against in big firms is clients that will only put forward happy clients, but that's not necessarily a good use of the investment. However you're running your program, whether you're listening internally or whether you're getting somebody in externally, you need to use it as an opportunity to speak to those clients who are less than satisfied. As I mentioned before, client listening is, it's different than the day-to-day conversation that colleagues are having. You don't need to have a technical skill set. You don't need to know the ins and outs of law or accountancy to have a client listening conversation. But the skills that you do need are the ability to build rapport, active listening skills, and to be able to pick up on hooks in terms of what people are saying and things that you might want to come back to later in the conversation or things that you want to dig into. And again, it's that a successful program is one that acts on the insight. And so this is why we use this graphic for to describe what we do in terms of gathering the insight, reflecting on what it's telling you, and then acting upon it and closing that loop. It's so important. So I should have said at the beginning, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to jump in, but obviously there'll be Q&A at the end as well. But turning to effective interviews. So if you're going to be doing your interviews in-house, or some of you might be in external roles doing these on behalf of clients, make sure that you've spoken to the people on the ground that are actually doing the work. You in a central role will not have a feel for every single matter or project that's going on across the firm. So having those conversations is really important. And make sure that the partner or whoever it is that you're talking to understands what client listening is and isn't. So it's not that sales opportunity. It's not that BD conversation. You're not going to get into the technical ins and outs of the day-to-day work. You're going to give the client a nice space to be able to share what they would like to share. Something that in terms of something else in terms of preparation is those of you who've got mature programs, if the client's been interviewed before, obviously make sure that you are rereading the note from the previous interview and follow through on any issues that they raised at that point, because you don't want to be sitting in front of the client and they say, oh, I spoke to your colleague 2 years ago and I raised this and nothing's changed. So it's a good opportunity to kind of do a bit of testing around. Actually, we're speaking to this person again in a couple of weeks. What's happened since we last spoke, and doing those check-ins. The next point is one where sometimes we come unstuck. So we often clients book in to speak to us via a Calendly link. And then sometimes what happens is the Calendly sends them a diary invite, but they haven't accepted it. So always check that if you're using that kind of system, or even if you're sending the appointment from Outlook, that they've actually accepted the invite and they've got it in their diary. Because there have been occasions where you're kind of sitting there and you've prepared for your call and you've cleared your diary and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and the other person doesn't turn up because they haven't actually got it in their diary. So a small point, but one I thought I would share because it is, it is pretty important, especially if the partner thinks you're going to be speaking to their client, but they haven't actually got it in their diary. So just a point of process there that I thought was important to raise. Then again, those of you who are doing these all the time, you will know that actually you just need to get yourself in the right physical space. So if you're working from home, kick the dog out, make sure you haven't got any interruptions, turn your notifications off. And if you're less familiar with doing these interviews, you might just need a bit of time, or whether you are experienced, you might just need a bit of time to kind of prepare yourself mentally. Just go and get some fresh air, clear whatever is out of your head in terms of what else has happened in the day, and come to that meeting fully present. So make sure you've got time. If you need to block out half an hour or whatever in your diary before a call, that's something that I would always advocate. Again, yeah, reread any notes or research. You might not be familiar with the client. The client teams obviously are. So make sure that you're doing your research on the client and who they're speaking to. And you don't need to do that to the nth degree, but just in terms of the business and who you're talking to, and what's been going on for them at a very high level. So then we come to the interview, and the first part of it is about building rapport. So frame the conversation and outline confidentiality. We do record our interviews, and I know that most firms do. But how we frame that, because some people are not sure how to frame it, is we say, is it okay if we record this for our own purposes so that we can have a free flowing conversation with you? And then once we've written up the notes, we will delete the recording, and we'll say, if there's something controversial, if you say something that you feel might not be well received or is a bit controversial, we'll give you the opportunity to say, actually, please don't include that or whatever. So that's the way that we frame recording, because it's an opportunity to have a decent conversation rather than somebody kind of looking at the top of your head because you're furiously making notes. The 4-minute rule is a nice one. Some of you might have heard us talk about this. So this is about showing up at your best early in every interaction. And so it links back to that point around just being in the best physical and mental space to be able to do the interview, to show up, to be able to conduct the interview in a way which works well for the client. They might be really rushed. They might be coming to it with, after on the back of a back-to-back meeting or back-to-back day, and you can see that they're quite agitated. There's something on their mind, and if you see that, I would say to them, look, I understand you're busy, or that I can see you're busy, or whatever. Would you like a minute, or would you like to come back to this another time? Because you're not going to get the best from them if they're not in the right headspace themselves either. There are lots of different trains of thought on this next point around using scripts and notes. We don't favour that approach. We call our interviews conversational. So there will be certain points that we will cover, and we sometimes introduce kind of icebreaker questions for clients to kind of ease them into the conversation and to give our client, the firm, a bit of a data point. So we might ask things around, how would you describe the firm in 3 words? Or is there an area that you can think of, or a word that they are not, but you would like them to be? And it just starts to kind of get them thinking about the relationship and that wider piece rather than the day to day. So we work on, as I said, this kind of conversational basis. So we'll ask big questions around what's their view of the firm at large, or can they give us an insight into their role and how they view the relationship. And those kind of questions can often give you lots of little hooks that you can pick up on later in the conversation. Be curious, so ask those questions and pick up on those hooks, and I'll come on to those in a minute. Be calm and be neutral, and I'll come on to that kind of neutral point in a minute. So in terms of uncovering the insight, the valuable insight that is the reason why we're all doing client listening. So dig deeper and use double clicks. So what I mean by double clicks are either where you've spoken to a partner and they've said, I'd really like to know more about this area. And you can kind of click into that. Excuse me a sec. Or where somebody's given you a nice big long answer and they say something and you think, oh, I want to pick up on that again in a minute. And I always have a blank piece of paper by my laptop. So when I'm doing an interview, I can just scribble a word or a phrase or something that I want to then pick up on again later on. Um, Use silence. So some people hate silence and find it really difficult not to jump in. And I'm not saying, you kind of sit there for 10 minutes just staring at each other, but just give people a couple of seconds to just think. And you'll know when it starts to feel uncomfortable, or they might say, oh no, actually, I haven't got anything else to say about that or whatever. But do use silence to give them that space to reflect. And in terms of the types of people that you might come across, some people will give you really short answers, and some people will give you really long answers. So the people that give you really short answers, you can really expand there. You can cover a lot of areas because, in that half hour, 45 minutes or whatever, they are not filling that space with words. And that's fine. Everybody's different, but you can cover a lot of different ground there with people who give short answers. The people that give really long answers are great for giving you hooks in terms of things that you want to pick up on, but you might not cover every single point that you want to make. But that's okay because they've managed to talk about what it is that's important to them. So the next point, excuse me, is around if you speak to somebody who's really, really happy, there are only so many ways they can say, I'm really, really happy. I love the firm. I love the people. Those interviews tend to be shorter because, as I said, there's only so many ways that they can say that they're happy. But this is a really good opportunity to take the conversation a bit away from their relationship with you as a business and ask them about, well, what does good look like for you in terms of client experience outside the workplace? What really delights you, or what really winds you up in terms of client experience in your personal life? And that can give you some really great insight into kind of what drives them and how they make decisions as well on a personal level, and therefore possibly on a work level as well. So that's a good one to kind of throw in if somebody keeps going, oh yeah, I'm really happy. No, I haven't got anything to complain about. And you kind of think, oh, I've only been speaking to you for 10 minutes. So you can kind of go a bit off piste with those kind of people. And then the final point on this one is, like, you're not there to sell, you're not there to fix. So those of us who are either external to the firm completely, or who are perhaps in a BD marketing client listening role, and you're talking to clients of the firm, but you're not involved in delivery, you're not there to fix the problem. So you're just there to listen, to acknowledge, and to take it away and say that you'll look into it and that somebody will come back to you with a resolution, and make sure that they do. Then, in terms of follow up, so we always, at the end of the call, say thank you very much on behalf of the firm, but make sure that the partner or whoever invited them follows up as well to thank them. If there's anything that the client has raised that you think is a red flag, obviously make sure that they know that immediately if there's something that they need to jump on. We don't work with transcripts. I know some firms do, but we don't produce transcripts. We do a detailed summary report, which goes into the areas of the conversation and then is supported by quotes. Um, Sensitive issues. Some people say, oh, what if some people are worried because what if the client says, I really don't like X individual, which can feel uncomfortable for you on the receiving end. But again, it's not your job to fix. That's where you need to play that back to the relevant partner. And that's an issue that they need to pick up. So you don't need to um, feel that you need to kind of fix or get involved in that. You're just relaying the client's points. Um, Obviously, capture your actions. Some people are thinking about how they do that centrally. So some firms have their actions all over the place. They have their insight all over the place. But the more that you can kind of centralize and get a grip of all of the actions that are coming out, you'll obviously be able to then identify the recurring themes. You'll be able to think about, oh gosh, this client was annoyed about this, but so was that client. And you'll start to identify the things that are coming out from the insight that you need to act on. So you can prioritize the actions and you can categorize the actions. So there are, in our view, you've got your BD actions. So the client says, right, over the next year, I'm thinking about X, or they might say, well, I'd never go to them for employment because they don't do employment when you do. So you need to obviously then get somebody from employment in front of that client. Um, and so you've got your BD actions, then you've got your kind of client experience service type actions, things that you need to fix rather than things that rather than BD opportunities to act on. So the fixing things tend to come into the categories around systems, processes, and behaviors. And process type things generally are easier to fix. Then you've got systems which are can take longer and involve some investment. And then you've got the kind of behavioral things, which are always the hardest ones to fix because they tend to lean into kind of cultural things as well, which is, obviously a huge thing to change and to work on, especially in bigger firms. But they're the kind of categories that things tend to fall into. So you could categorize your actions. Um, and make sure that you are building follow-up plans. So I have one client, they are based in the Middle East actually, and after each interview, the managing partner, obviously, he invites the clients, but then he also does the follow-up. So if the client has said, if it's one of those clients that said, oh, I'd like to meet somebody from employment or whatever, he is the one that instigates that to make sure it happens. He will go with the employment partner to meet the client for coffee or lunch or whatever. But he's that kind of senior sponsor that leads the program, invites the clients, and makes sure that the action happens as well. Um, track how you're closing the loop, that kind of you said we did, not like I always suggest this to firms, but I'd love to see one that actually does it around saying, we're not perfect. These are the themes coming out of our client feedback, and this is what we've done to address those points. So if any of you are on the call and you already do that, then fantastic. Make sure you share internally. So again, I was talking to somebody last week, and they would like to use their client insight for some internal comms newsletters. These are the things that clients are saying that they really like about us. This is where they're getting frustrated with us, and this is what we're going to do about it. So it's not necessarily always an external thing. It can help with internal comms as well. And make sure that you're, praising and thanking people who are mentioned in client interviews. So quite often, um, partners can be a bit ego driven. And so they like to get all the praise, but actually we try and surface anybody else from the client team who might have done a great job. And then we say make sure that you're passing that on to the individual, because um, quite often it is the juniors who are working away behind the scenes. So it's nice for them to get that recognition from clients. And then repeat insights across teams. So that could be sector teams speaking to a number of clients within a particular sector, or for huge accounts, it could be speaking to different people who are different client stakeholders who are within a particular account, and make sure that you're trying to get that consistency in terms of your approach, but also in terms of the service and the experience that clients are receiving, because that's where some of the bugbears set in. So I like, we will hear so often, I love this team, I don't like that team. And so getting consistency when you're working in bigger firms is so important. That's the end of my main bit of content. Does anybody have any questions? If you don't want to speak up, then feel free to put them in the chat.
Yeah, Hi, and I've got a question. It's something we've been discussing internally at PM, because we're at the moment we're only doing MPS.
Yeah.
We have done structured interviews historically, but for some reason since COVID we just kind of stopped doing it. And we need to resume it. How do you Any advice on how we go about designing an interview structure without it being scripted, just to ensure that we are um every interview is is kind of managed in the same way, so it makes the analysis easier at the end. Because also I'm a bit worried if we end up going sort of freewheeling it, it's going to be
Yeah.
impossible to do the qualitative analysis.
Yeah. So the approach that we take is we do try and get a bit of quant data in terms of those questions. How would you describe the firm? Or what's the one word that they're not, but you would like or you need them to be? That gives you some data in terms of, creating word clouds and things. We do tend to ask the MPS question. But there are so many with AI and other tools that are out on the market. They are so much more sophisticated at analyzing that qualitative data to help you pull out those themes. So have a structure in terms of so ours is kind of going big, the firm at large. Then we kind of drill down into relationships. Then we might talk a bit about the wider market or competition and things like that. And then we ask them, what's going on for you and over the next sort of 12 to 18 months? What are your big priorities or challenges? And again, you'll be able to, if you do enough, you'll be able to start picking out some themes. Does that help?
Yeah, useful. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Do you tend to do most of your interviews in person or online?
No, they're pretty much all online, Pen.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's the expectation largely nowadays.
Yeah,
Especially if we are doing the interviews. So I think if you are in a firm and you're doing the interviews, then it would be more normal um, for you to go and see the client in person. Whereas when you're an external, they tend to be they tend to be online.
okay, thank you.
Laurence?
Thank you. I was going to ask, we're looking to find out what our clients are thinking about our client portal. And I don't know if it's an in-depth interview or focus group that would be, your recommendations for that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you can weave it into the to interviews, but if it's quite a specific, it depends on who, goes back to that kind of conversation we were having yesterday, who you speak to. So
Mhm.
if you're speaking to somebody quite senior at the client and they might not be involved in the day-to-day, then they might not know much about the portal.
Mhm.
If you're speaking to somebody who is your day-to-day contact or somebody within the client team and they use the portal, they're the ones to ask.
Great, thank you. And in terms of lengths of interview, you mentioned a chatty candidate and then somebody less
Yeah.
chatty. How do you draw out someone that doesn't talk much, and then how do
Yeah.
you
You're gonna
restrict
get,
someone that's chatty, or do you
yeah.
let them go?
You I think you have to accept that you're gonna get a mix.
Mhm.
And we tend to schedule our interviews for half an hour or 45 minutes. We're driven by the firm. Some firms say no more than half an hour. And we're like, fine. Others we schedule for 45 minutes. And we'll do a check-in with the client. If they're talking quite a lot and you're getting to over half an hour, you're kind of, we'll check in and see, do they have that extra 15 minutes? Would they like to continue? And
Mhm.
we don't want to kind of stop them if they're sharing some things that are really important to them. So we'll never put anything in back to back, if you like. We'll always allow the time. But some people are less chatty, and that's fine. You just have to kind of caveat that with when you're feeding that back to the partners. Um, and also, as I said, the people who are really happy that love the firm tend to have less to share because there's only, unless they're going to start speaking in a different language, there's only so many ways they can say, I'm really happy, I really like the firm up there. They're responsive and they're proactive and they communicate well and this, that, and the other. So those really happy client interviews tend to not take as long as the ones which are more balanced.
Thank you.
I'll just ask a question, Anna.
Mm.
When you've done these interviews, do you find there's a number of occasions where the client speaks quite candidly to you and then they retract things that,
No,
they don't want things passed on?
no, no, not generally. If it's really sensitive, then we will kind of agree with them how we're going to put it in the report or whatever. But I've only had one instance where the client wanted to share something really sensitive, and he knew that the notes were going to the managing partner and a couple of other people in the firm. And he said, what I'm going to say in this section, I only want the managing partner to know. So obviously I took that out the report and just sent that
Okay.
bit to the managing partner. But
Do you always?
generally, because it is an opportunity for them to share. But yeah, if they've said something really controversial or sensitive, then we'll agree. We'll say, right, how would you like us to, or we'll say, well, this is how we think we will play that back. Are you okay with that? But it's quite rare. They usually just talk.
Yeah. Do you always sort of talk to them about who the information can be shared with, or if they've got any preferences? I mean, obviously,
Um,
most firms will say who it's going back to
yeah.
you when you are doing those, but
Sometimes they'll say who sees this, and normally it is somebody like yourself, a head of business development, and the head of business development, the managing partner, and the lead partner. And then they can cascade that as they wish or take bits out of it. They can use the whichever bits of the interview that they would like to share with the team.
great. I have got another question, but I don't want to jump. It was more just building on I think the place where we all seem to fall down I think is the actions and
Yeah.
actually doing something with it, because people get busy, and if you just send someone an email, you've got the actions there, you have that conversation. It's how do you ensure you keep that going and the actions are actually done and then
Yeah.
fed back that they've been
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can close the loop with a client as well? I don't know whether
Yeah.
having that feedback with a client almost independently again, that do they feel that actually it was useful for them?
Yeah. Yeah. So what we are starting to build in with some clients is, well, in 6 months' time, say if we're interviewing, I don't know, 30 clients or whatever, let's pick a random sample of those clients, and we'll just go and have a 15-minute conversation with them and say, when we spoke last time, these are the things you've raised. Have they done anything about it?
I think that's a good idea, because actually if you tell the partners that's going to happen,
Yeah.
they're more likely to do their action.
Yeah, and it drives engagement in the whole program. So why would somebody come and talk to you in 2 years' time if they spoke to you 2 years ago and you didn't action what they raised then? And it's just that whole, if we're trying to, and with most professional services firms, we want to be the trusted advisor. Well, there's no better way to build trust than to act on the feedback that you're being given.
Yeah, thank you.
Otherwise, it's just it's an empty kind of, the stuff that you put in the email at the beginning. We really care about what our clients think and how they feel, and this is really valuable to us. That's just they're empty words then if you don't actually close the loop. So, any other questions?
I have one just in terms of the selection process. So,
Yeah.
what are you seeing are the, I guess, like standard criteria for picking the clients? You said obviously unhappy clients, not happy client, majority is happy clients. But if we're trying to dictate centrally who we choose as opposed to leaving it up to the partners.
Yeah.
So is it like, your top 10 clients, your top 20? I mean, obviously with the resource, to get around 50 is quite a lot, but is it that type of approach that you see happening, or is it more nuanced depending on if you're focusing on a sector perhaps, or if there's any other strategic listening that needs to be done? But for us, there isn't at the moment, where we just want to get a baseline of clients. So is it better to take the first top 10 or 20, or further down the client list, select section from the top, some from the middle, and some from the lower fee providing clients?
Yeah, you could do a mix really. So I think key clients are really important. They will know a lot about your firm. They are where the longest standing relationships are.
Yeah.
But then don't ignore the high growth clients or the newer clients, because the clients that are coming to you more recently will have more experience of things like your onboarding and be able to comment about the know your client checks and all the compliance stuff that goes with appointing a law firm. So there's no point in asking somebody that who you've been working with for 25 years, because they won't remember. So it's good, and it's good to then speak to those newer clients as well to identify those growth opportunities. So just showing a real interest in them as a business, rather than just saying, well, we're only going to invest in speaking to people who spend loads of money with us, can be a really good way of setting the tone for the relationship. We know you don't have to say this to them, but internally we know they're newer. We know they don't spend as much money with us as this client, but actually we can see a lot of potential here and we want to invest early in the relationship.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
No probs. Any more for any more? Right, so I have one more thing to share. which some of you may be aware of, which is our Beyond the Feedback event. So this is taking place in April. So we are bringing together people who have client listening or client experience as all or part of their role from across professional services firms, different sizes across the UK. This is the first one that we've run, so we're purposefully keeping it quite small. So we'll have 30 people and we're down to the last few places. So if anybody would like to join us for that, let us know. It's going to be at Henley Business School on the 23rd of April. And I know that some of you on the call are already coming along, which is fantastic. But as well as Claire and I, we're going to get some client experience experts from outside professional services to share their thoughts. So a lady called Emma Dark, who has led client experience for brands like the White Company, for Estee Lauder. She's also done some work in professional services as well. And she's the last couple of years been working for some internet providers. And then we have Rob Stubbs, who has led CX for Sainsbury's, Argos, Travis Perkins. He also used to work for, I think it was Shoesmiths for quite a while. So they've both got a lot of experience in and out of the sector. So they'll be talking to people who are there, and we'll be running some workshops and obviously opportunities for people to learn and share from one another. So if you would like to join us, then please let us know. Our next month, our focus for our Insight community is going to be around training internal teams to listen. So because of half term, we're not going to do a webinar next month, but we'll have our community call, which is open to you all, and that will be around that topic. So if you are a firm where you are going to be doing your listening in-house, Claire is going to share her thoughts around the best way to train internal listeners. And that call is going to be at 10 o'clock on the 26th of Feb. So if you would like to be added to the list to find out more about that, then let me know. And then we are going to run a webinar at the beginning of March. Claire's going to do an International Women's Day webinar, so look out for that too. But thank you all very much for joining me, for spending your lunchtime with me, and I really hope that was helpful. We always, it wouldn't be right if we didn't welcome feedback. So please let us know if that was useful or what you would like us to talk about in future webinars, or if there's anything that you think of later that you wish you'd asked, please just drop us a note, and we will happily answer any questions that you have got. In the meantime, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Thanks, Anna. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.